Hello there, thrill seekers. It is raining out here, but I'm under a sort of a roof-like thingy. But I got to get this video done and before the rain gets worse, and so there's just going to be garbage trucks going by. I pray that you don't mind that too much. I'll try to talk louder than the garbage trucks. So, I was asked if I would do a video about Nishijima Roshi's 4 philosophies, and I will. And I probably should have done this ages ago. I have mentioned this in other videos, but I haven't done a video, as far as I can remember, specifically about the 4 philosophies, or maybe I did, but if I did, it was a long time ago. So, the best ways, if you want to look them up for yourself to find this, is in a book called 3 Philosophies and 1 Reality, which was another way that he expressed it. Sometimes he said 4 philosophies, sometimes he said 3 philosophies and 1 reality. One of the philosophies was reality, and here is a whole book on it. It's very short, and this is available as a print on demand from Amazon, and it's only $9, so a bargain. Another place you can find it is, there's a chapter dedicated to it in his book To Meet the Real Dragon, which is also available on Amazon as a print-on-demand for $12. I don't get any of the money for either of these books, so I'm just telling you where they are. It's got a different cover. This is the original cover, and now it's got a different sort of green cover. So they're both still available if you want to read up on it. So, this is a collection of talks he gave for NHK Radio, and NHK is sort of the BBC of Japan. It's sort of the state-run radio and television corporation, I guess. That's what we call it. And I'm just going to tell you what it says in this book and just give you my little editorialization on it as I do. Nishijima Roshi, by the way, in case anybody's new to watching my videos, this was my ordaining Zen teacher. This is the guy who I studied with in Japan, who made me a Zen master, in quotes, and that's him. And this was probably his greatest contribution to the world of Buddhist philosophy. It's kind of a shame that not a lot of people have picked up on this 4 philosophies thing, because if you're reading Dogen and want to understand Dogen, the 4 philosophies is the key that unlocks the whole treasure house. It's also a way of understanding all of Buddhist philosophy, although it might be a little bit more controversial there. Alright, so this is what Nishijima Roshi has to say about this scheme of the 4 philosophies. First, the first section is titled The 4 Noble Truths, and here's what he says about that. Buddhist scriptures tell us that after Gautama Buddha attained the truth, that's when he became enlightened, he wanted to teach others what he had learned, but he also had some doubt as to whether people would be able to understand his theory because of its complexity, and because it was very different from the way most people conceived of things. Tradition says that a god from heaven, that would be Indra, came and gave him great encouragement to give his first sermon, so he went ahead. His first sermon was preached to his 5 former companions with whom he studied asceticism. We are told that in his first sermon he preached the 4 Noble Truths, or in my translation, the theory of the 4 views and the middle way. So first he presents us with the traditional interpretation of the 4 Noble Truths, which is Katvari Arya Satyani. I think I'm getting that reasonably right. They say that the universe explodes if you pronounce Sanskrit wrong. So the universe didn't explode, therefore I must have pronounced that right. So the 4 Noble Truths in the traditional way of giving them are Dukkha Satya, the truth of suffering; Samudaya Satya, the truth of aggregates or the origin of suffering; Nirodha Satya, the truth of cessation or denial or the destruction of suffering; and Marga Satya, the truth of the right way. So about the traditional interpretation of the 4 Noble Truths, he says, "When I was a teenager, I read about the 4 Noble Truths in Buddhist books, but I could not understand what they were referring to at all. So these 4 Noble Truths, which were said to be the core of Buddhism itself, became a hindrance or stumbling block in my efforts to understand Buddhism." If we look in old scriptures, we can find the traditional meaning of the 4 Noble Truths. They explain that the truth of suffering means that all things and events in this world are suffering, that the truth of aggregates, that's the second one, often called cause of suffering is desire, anyway, here we go, means that all suffering derives from human desire, and that the truth of cessation or denial means that we must destroy our desire, And finally, that the truth of the right way means that having destroyed our desire, we can find the right way. But I could find no real meaning in these explanations, no matter how hard I tried. If all things and events in this world are suffering, then Buddhism can be at best a dogmatic and pessimistic religion. If all suffering results from human desire, then Buddhism can be no more than asceticism. If the idea of destroying all our desires was a Buddhist idea, then Buddhism must be a religion which advocates what is impossible, for it is utterly impossible for us to destroy our desires. Desire is the basis of our human existence ourself. The truth of the right way is further explained as the Eightfold Noble Path. Now, sometimes the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right thinking, right speech, right behavior, right livelihood, right effort, right state of body, and right state of mind. Which is interesting that he puts it that way, because the normal way of putting number 7, number 8, all the others are normal, the way everybody does it. But usually you hear number 7 as right mindfulness, and number 8 as right concentration or right samadhi. But he gives it as right state of body and right state of mind. But he says, I can find no relationship between this fourth truth and this first 3. When I was 18, I found a book called Shobo Genzo, and it was written in the 13th century by Dogen, a master, and he says that he was amazed that there could be a book written in Japanese which I was unable to understand at all. The book is composed of many contradictory statements, and it made it appear illogical. But after reading and rereading it many times, I found that Shobo Genzo is in fact constructed in a very special way, using a unique pattern of expression. And he says, Master Dogen expresses his ideas in Shobo Genzo based on a pattern of 4 phases. Now here's the 4 philosophies. First, he explains a problem from the idealistic point of view. That is, as an idea using abstract concepts. That's number 1. Then, number 2, immediately after his first phase, he explains the same problem, but this time from the objective or material point of view. In other words, he gives concrete examples and facts. Then, in the next phase, this is number 3, he explains the problem yet a third time as a real problem, that is, realistically thinking. Of course, it is very difficult for him to explain the reality surrounding the problem with words in a book. But he attempts to do so by bringing together the subjective viewpoint, which he presents first, and the second objective viewpoint, so subjective and objective. He synthesizes the 2 viewpoints into a realistic appraisal of the problem, a synthesis of the self and the external world. In the final phase, this is number 4, the 4 philosophies, he tries to suggest the subtle, ineffable nature of reality itself by using symbolic, poetic, or figurative forms of speech. Now, in To Meet the Real Dragon, he gives a concrete example of this in a chapter called The 4 Philosophies. And the concrete example is the first paragraph. Is this the first paragraph? First or second paragraph of Genjo? It's early in Genjo Koan. I don't think it's the first paragraph, but it's at the very beginning of Genjo Koan, which he translates as the realized law of the universe, which is probably Dogen's most famous piece of writing. I have stopped and started this video about 12 million times to get over the sound of those trucks going by. I'm really sorry. You're getting really the least of it. Okay, so here we go. Here is what Dogen says in Genjo Koan. First phase, first philosophy. When all dharmas are seen as the Buddhist dharma, then there are delusion and realization, there is practice, there is life, and there is death, there are Buddhas, and there are ordinary beings. Okay, that's first phase. Number 2. When all the myriad dharmas are not of the self, there is no delusion and no enlightenment, no Buddhas and no ordinary beings, no life and no death. So in the materialistic way, objective way of looking at things, you'd have to say there's no enlightenment, no delusion, no Buddhas, everything's just matter and stuff. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, this is action. The Buddhist way is originally transcendent over abundance and scarcity, so there is life and death, there is delusion and realization, there are beings and Buddhas. So that's synthesizing the subjective and objective viewpoints. And number 4, this is his reality. Though all this may be true, flowers fall even if we love them, and weeds grow even if we hate them. So that is the concrete example of how Dogen gives these 4 philosophies. Now, here's where Nishijima Roshi gets a little bit bold. He says, after discussing how he discovered this. Then I remembered the Four Noble Truths, which had defeated me so completely. I could not help seeing a link between the four-phased pattern in Master Dogen's works and the Four Noble Truths. Then I started to think that possibly the biggest contradiction which Gautama Buddha must have faced in his thinking would have been between the subjective, idealistic thought of traditional Indian religion, which is Hinduism, and the objective, materialistic philosophies of the six great philosophers who were popular in India in his time. I'm not exactly sure who these six philosophers were by name or anything, but Nishijima Roshi used to refer to them constantly, so apparently there was a big movement of materialistic philosophy going on during Buddha's time, as well as the more idealistic sort of Hindu philosophy. I thought that Gautama Buddha's solution to this contradiction was his discovery that we are in fact living in reality, not as idealists tend to think in the world of ideas, or as materialists tend to think in a world of objective matter alone. Gautama Buddha established his own philosophy based on the fact that we live in the world of momentary existence, in the real world itself. But to express this real world in words is impossible. So he used a method which brought together the two fundamental philosophical viewpoints into a synthesized whole. He realized that philosophy is not reality, it is only a discussion of the nature of reality. He needed some method with which people could see directly what the nature of reality is. That method is Zazen, a practice which was already traditional in India from ancient times. Now he explains the connection between the two. I thought that dukkha satya, or the truth of suffering, was the ancient Indian way of expressing idealistic philosophy. When we are full of ideals and anxious to realize those ideals, we invariably suffer from being unable to realize them. I thought that samudaya satya, or the truth of aggregates, might in fact refer to aggregates of paramanu, the Sanskrit word for the smallest particle of matter in existence, which we call the atom in modern terms, and actually we've gotten even smaller than that, but basically the same idea, that there's small particles of matter that make up all of matter. The truth of aggregates would thus refer to a primitive science of matter, to the philosophy of materialism as it existed at that time. Then I interpreted Nirodha Satya, the truth of cessation or denial, to mean a dialectic synthesis, a negation of idealism and materialism, so a denial of materialism and idealism. In the ultimate stage, philosophies can never be reality itself. Gautama Buddha found this fact, and so Marga Satya, the truth of the right way, is his recommendation to practice Zazen. Gautama Buddha thought that idealism is human thought in its first stage based on the subjective viewpoint. But as a reaction to this first stage, materialistic thought arises naturally. These two viewpoints are always in conflict, a fact which can be seen in every country in the civilized world. Gautama Buddha established Buddhism to transcend both idealistic and materialistic thought. Buddhism synthesizes the idealistic point of view with the materialistic point of view to give a realistic point of view. A concrete example of an idealist is a person who is always suffering from the frustration of being unable to reach his ideals. A materialist suffers from being unable to find any meaning in his life beyond the pleasures of the senses. We can say that an idealist would do well to study the world around him through his senses, that's materialism, and the materialist would benefit from becoming a little idealistic. In this way, both of them can find a synthesis between the two states, and this is the Buddhist state. And then, scrolling down a little bit, in the area of science, Buddhism believes in harmony between science and religion. Until the end of the Middle Ages, spiritual religions had a very powerful hold, but in modern times, belief in spiritual religions has become weaker and weaker, defeated by the discoveries of modern science. This is not a stable situation. Of course, scientific knowledge is vital to our lives, but it should not lead us to deny what has yet to be discovered by science. Most people do not appreciate this fact. They think that it is not consistent to believe in both science and religion. And that's it in kind of a nutshell. There's certainly more to it than that, but this video is already getting really long, and the rain has gotten really, really hard out here. So I'm going to go back inside, and if you want more explanations of this, leave me a comment in the comments below, and I'll see if I can do another video on this when it's not so rainy. Anyway, if you want to support me getting raincoats and umbrellas, you can go to the URL you're seeing on your screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts, those are my only means of making a living, and I really appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta donate. If you don't want to donate, gosh, this rain is going hard. I don't know how I'm gonna make it from here to the house without getting my computer soaked, so maybe you can donate a little to buy me a new computer. We'll see. Anyway, have a good time all the time. We'll see you later. Bye. Alright, as you can see, Ziggy does not like the rain. He just likes to sleep in front of the heater. So we'll leave him alone. Okay, see you later, Ziggy.